This took place a few years ago. I was in my late teens, driving home at 10 p.m. This was a typical shift for me, and I wasn't too tired. I know what I saw. I lived somewhat out in the country, far enough to be on septic, close enough to be on the county's water system. It wasn't irregular to see wildlife at night. Elk, deer, barn cats, even occasionally dogs. I had been living here for a few years at this point. During this specific time, one particular neighbor had a really bad habit of his dog running free on the side of the road. I love animals, so I would always pull over, call the number on his collar, and get him back to his owner. Anyways, I'm driving home, nearly 1 block and 3 turns from my house. I see this figure out of the corner of my eye. It looks like a medium-sized dog. I roll down my window, turn my music down, and start calling out to it as I would a dog.
Hey, sweetie, come here, baby.
It seemed very shy, as it wouldn't look at me, and its body language was very timid. I kept trying to speak sweetly to it to let it know I wasn't a threat. It looked a little skinny, seemed to have short, gray hair. I really wanted to see if I could help it, maybe find its owner, or get it somewhere safe and fed. It finally responds to my sweet talk and turns to face me. My stomach dropped. This is going to sound crazy, but it had a human face. The best way I could describe it is like a Teletubby. I really wish there was any other way to describe it for the sake of my credibility. It had no distinctive features, and its head was still shaped like a dog. It didn't make any faces, any noises, and it didn't speak either. I was so surprised that I screamed,
What the fuck?
and sped off. I was so scared too, because my house had a gate that I had to open, and I didn't know if it was following me or anything. I didn't look back, and it didn't appear to chase me after I was speeding off. I feel bad about it to this day. I wish I didn't react the way I did, but I didn't know if I was in danger. Seeing something like that, something you can't explain, I don't know, but I really can't stress enough how it did not make any facial expressions, noises, speech, anything. I was the one going out of my way to bug it, and I was, bluntly, a dick to it. I haven't seen it since. I wish I could change how I reacted, and I really wonder about it all of the time. I did some internet scavenging afterwards, and I haven't been able to find any experiences like it, which really makes me feel nuts. Maybe it was something slightly different than a skinwalker, but this is the closest lore that I know of. Please, let me know if any of you have had a similar experience. I believe I saw what a lot of people call a not deer last fall. I figured this is as good a place as any to post this, since I see the term not deer tied in with skinwalkers and other similar creatures pretty often. There isn't a lot to this story, but it has stuck with me, and every time I think back on it, I feel really uneasy. I live in Colorado, in a mountain town south of Denver. The road I live off of is a winding back road through a valley. One side of the road is right against rock, steep like a wall in some places, and more sloping in others. And the other side kind of drops off into the valley, Also, might be worth noting that the mountain on the other side of the valley is a huge burn site with nothing but skeleton trees. I've heard a couple of stories that take place near burn sites, so maybe there's some correlation. This was probably around August, early September. I was driving home late, probably around 1 a.m. I know the road and all the curves pretty well, so I was going a pretty decent speed and probably wasn't being as actively aware of my surroundings as I should have been, especially since deer and elk are pretty common here. Anyway, I was coming up on the last curve before my street, and I saw a deer standing at the side of the road, on the side with the rock face. This deer was standing completely still, facing the rock wall. That in itself doesn't sound too strange, I know, but there was something unnatural in its stillness. And the fact that it was staring straight into the rock, nowhere it could go, was odd. But what stuck with me is the feeling I immediately got upon seeing it. Just an ungodly pit in my stomach. It felt like my heart stopped. And this wasn't the, oh shit, the deer on the side of the road surprised me kind of stomach pit. This was an absolute feeling of dread. It also seemed like there was something just off about the deer. For the life of me, I can't picture it in my head or pinpoint what it was, but something proportion-wise was wrong. Like maybe its legs were a little too long, or its torso was stretched out. I'm not sure. I didn't have time to really react other than just slow down a bit. I just kept driving. As I rounded the curve, I literally could not take my eyes off of the rearview mirror. And the thing didn't move at all. Not a flinch. Nothing. Just stone still. Even after it was behind the curve and I couldn't see it anymore, I still couldn't peel my eyes off the rear view. I pulled into the garage and hit the garage door closer before I had even parked. And when I got out of the car, I couldn't stop myself from running up the stairs. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, like I was in danger. I'm not by any means superstitious. I like stories about cryptids, and I think they're super interesting, but I've never really believed them. But since that night, as short-lived as that encounter was, if there is one supernatural thing I believe in, it was that creature. I know in my gut it wasn't just a deer. It's also worth noting that after I told my visiting friend about the experience, she admitted that the year before, when she was visiting for the first time, she felt a similar dread and pit in her stomach as we had approached that same spot. It seems like the not deer is pretty new, and there aren't a whole lot of stories and sightings of them. But from what I have read, I am led to believe that that's what I saw that night. First off, I'm going to say that I have been somewhat interested in this kind of stuff for a while, but I have always been pretty skeptical of most paranormal things, taking every story like this I hear with a grain of salt. Also, I have taken multiple camping trips to the Utah deserts, and this is the first time anything like this has happened to me. Yesterday, me and my 3 brothers went on a short, one-night camping trip to the lava tubes near Fillmore, Utah, but pretty much in the middle of nowhere in the desert. We had a good evening hanging out and talking before watching the stars, a movie, and then going to bed. We brought a 4-man tent and set up our campsite far from the dirt road Even though we were the only people there, my brothers all fell asleep pretty fast. Though, for some reason, I couldn't. So I just listened to the coyotes howling in the distance for about an hour and a half. By now it's about 12:30 or 1 a.m. and I'm still awake. Suddenly, I get this odd feeling, like the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and my gut sank at the same time. That's when I hear it. Someone, or something, was walking toward our campsite. At first, I thought it was just a coyote, but it sounded heavy, and its footsteps sounded like it was bipedal. I could hear its feet sliding through the grass and shifting the stones on the ground as it was getting closer and closer to us until the footsteps sounded like it was right beside our tent. But I couldn't see it from where I was. Then I heard a shrill, hollow, unearthly whistle coming from just outside the tent. I went stiff. My heart was racing. It sounded so unnatural and alien that I didn't know how to react. I was just terrified. Finally, after a long minute of silence, I heard it slowly walk away, the same heavy footsteps, until I couldn't hear it anymore. I was more scared than I have ever been in my life last night. I was too scared to take a peek outside the tent then, but now I kind of wish I had. I stayed awake for another hour, wondering if I should wake my brothers or not. But I decided against it and tried to sleep. This morning, before we packed up and left, I told them what I heard, but none of them believed me until we made it back home and my dad told us something really unsettling. He said that last night, around 12:30, he felt super worried about us and he didn't know why. He told us that he had this feeling like we were in severe danger and that he needed to pray for our protection, which he did immediately. Once my brothers heard him say that, they took my story a little more seriously. But they are still skeptical, as am I. I don't know what I heard last night, but I do know that I heard something. If anyone has any idea as to what it is, please tell me.